Are we looking good?
We are looking great. So thank you everyone for joining us today. We are kicking off, as we said, a weeding series. This is part one, weeding basics. We called it collection cultivation, just with that gardening kind of metaphor, weeding very much a gardening yard work kind of word. So Becky, we're looking forward to it. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you and hi everybody. As Sam said, we are here today for the first session in the series Collection Cultivation. This is Weeding Basics and I'm Becky Heil, the Southeast District Consultant for the State Library of Iowa. I have been doing a variation of this presentation for about 15 years now, and it's had kind of a lot of titles over the years. I think my favorite one is called Weed 'em and Weep. Weep no more. That was what my hope was, that you wouldn't cry when you thought about weeding after you had been through this presentation. The old obvious one, Weed 'em and Reap, we've had that as a title. The very first time I did this was probably in the 90s, and the Nike commercial Just Do It was on, and so that was the title of this for a while. I also have seen this called, this is a sticker that Sam gave to me a couple of months ago, Keep Calm and Weed On. I really liked that. And then Weed to Achieve is another title that I have used for this. So I'm going to start by asking you, you can just think about this if you want, or you can throw comments in the chat. Who of you likes to weed? I am the self-proclaimed weeding queen. There's kind of a joke hanging out there that I ought to have a t-shirt that says this. How about the rest of you? So as a very cocky 25-year-old freshly degreed children's librarian, I walked into my first job and blithely announced that at least half their collection needed to go. Unfortunately, I was right about that. And within 5 years, I had removed nearly 2/3 of the collection. Luckily, we had some extra money that year, so I was able to purchase a lot of new quality books. All of the measures just shot through the roof at that time. The number of visits and the amount of circulation was just off the charts. I think that might have been my first taste of some kind of power, and I really liked it. So since then, I have become passionate about advocating for weeding, and it is one of my most favorite things to teach. I kind of like these quotes. It shows that this is an age-old problem. They are quotes from the crew manual, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. And so as you look through these, think about if there are any that kind of resonate with you. Look at this very first one here. 1901 is the first time this quote came out about the issue about weeding in a public library. 1938, still a long time ago. This Gladys apparently had a book called Suggestions on Discarding. And I like this one. The mistakes that we make are not the things that you threw away by mistake. It's the junk that you left on your shelves. This third one, a little bit later now, 1996, Will Manley was one of my favorite columnists, and his quote has to do with one of the most undesirable jobs in the library being weeding. He also called it one of the most important. And I think this short and pithy one is a pretty good one. Like a good haircut, it's not what you cut, it's what you leave. So we have a poll now, and I'd like to hear from you guys. Why don't you weed? I've put down a couple of the things that I have heard in the past. If you have something that's sort of in that other under there, you are welcome to put that into the comments in the chat. So why do you not weed? Let's see. I should be able to see this, right, Sam? Yes.
I think so. I clicked launch. Are you seeing them come through?
Yes, I am.
And you can select multiple here, so that's good. I will say we mostly had people, when you asked the question, do you like to weed? At least the people who chimed in chat have said they do like to. And I just want to point out that Wendy Doyle is in the room with us today, and Wendy is going to be a panelist for us at the end of the month on our Wedded to Weeding panel, and her comment was me, I love to weed. So that will be you'll have to come back and hear Wendy because she's going to share on the panel with us as well.
Cool.
helps keep things fresh. Someone says it depends on the collection or area of the library. And I wonder if that's where next week's session is going to come in handy, because you'll get some extra tools. Maybe it's a part of you've been tasked to weed a part of the library you don't know very well. And might be have some tools next week's session to help you understand those.
Cool.
So we've got about, it looks like our participation is about topped off. So I'm gonna,
all right.
I'll end the poll, and I think I can share the results out if you want to talk through them.
Yes.
There we go. Can you guys see the results?
Yeah. Cool. And I don't know if this happened to you guys, but on my screen, I didn't scroll down all the way. And so there's one at the bottom that did not get any votes for it, but I'm hoping that was mainly because you guys didn't scroll down all the way, like I didn't, so that I didn't see that was, I thought, well, there should be one more down there. All right, so I am actually going to go ahead and look at some of these kind of in order, and let's talk through some of these. So that first one, it's sacrilege to throw out a book. Let's face it, some of us got into libraries because we love books. So that is a very real one, that it's really hard for us to wrap our brains around that. Somebody may want it someday. Now, before I put the poll down, I noticed that that was one of the higher ones that was up there. So my response to that is, yep, somebody may want it someday. But do you have everything that everybody wants in your collection right now? Probably not. So why worry about this? I know that feels a little different, but if they come in and ask for something and it's not in your collection, they don't need to know that you weeded it, 6 months ago. The other piece to that one is there was actually a study done at Yale, and they went back through a lot of weeding projects, and what they found was that only 3% of what you've thrown out is actually going to be asked for after weeding. So when you look at the benefits compared to that one, oops, maybe somebody will want it, 3% of the time is all that's going to happen. And again, that was, that's quite a while ago, but I'm betting that's pretty close. It just feels like more because it sort of stands out in our mind. Something is better than nothing. And what I have written in my notes on this one is no, just no. Something is not better than nothing. We're going to talk about this one a little bit later on. I've got a couple of quotes that I want to show you on that one. Books are lost and stolen every day anyhow. I wasn't sure if that's really a thing, if anybody actually believes that one. It wasn't a list of reasons that I found, however. And then I got to thinking, maybe patrons think this. They know that, people steal books, and they know that things are lost a lot. And so they figure, why do you need to bother weeding if it's going to go away anyhow? It might be worth something. This is one of my favorite ones. I found a couple of pieces of information on that, and one of them says, even if the copyright of a book is before 1900, so we're talking 125 years ago, even if it's before 1900, the chances are 1 in several thousand that it's even worth $5. That kind of tells you something. Books today, there's also another piece of information out there, and I don't have it right now, but there's a date, like if it's published east of the Mississippi, it has to be published like before the 1700s or something dumb like that. If it's west of the Mississippi, it might be 1800s, but it has to be really, really old. And I'm hoping that you don't have any of that stuff in your collection at this point. So that whole idea of it might be worth something, again, is pretty slim for most of our public libraries. Might make me look bad if I weed a book that I selected. Well, I kind of get this one. I bought it and it didn't go out. Maybe I made a mistake. You wouldn't want anybody to think that. So that one is another one that I think is a little bit easier for me to understand. Now, these last 3 reasons, sometimes weeding can seem arbitrary or unstructured. I've had people say that to me. But how do you decide? How do you know? Are there any rules? And usually my answer is there are some rules, but you don't have to stick to all of them. So it can seem very arbitrary, and that is difficult for some people to kind of walk in and do. I don't know how, and I don't have time. And those are ones that I hear a lot about. So now let's talk about why we should weed. So the first reason is relevance. The pictures that are on here, I hope you can see them and read the stuff on the screen there, are from an actual book. It was published in the 70s. It was called I'm Glad I'm a Boy, I'm Glad I'm a Girl. We kind of think about sexist with this one. It says boys are doctors, girls are nurses. Boys are policemen, girls are meter maids. Now, granted, this is kind of a blatant example, and it's 50 years ago now that this was on library shelves, but there are still lots of books in our collections that are old, and there are also new titles that come out that may be racist or have some other type of bias. So one of the reasons we really want to think about weeding is the relevance to today's culture. Another reason, why should we weed currency? We don't want books that are outdated on our shelves. So do you have a lot of books about Michael Jordan in your collection? He was popular when I was buying children's books in the 80s. Now, you might think he's the greatest basketball player of all time, but today they don't want Michael Jordan. They want Steph Curry or LeBron James. They don't want Madonna. They want Ariana Grande. They don't even know who Madonna is. Another one that I talk about with this is, people will say, but history doesn't change. Why can't I keep history books? Why do I need to get rid of those? That's true. A lot of our history hasn't changed, and there are some that we want to keep in the collections, but our interpretation of history has changed. And so we want to make sure that we're keeping up with that as well. Why should we weed? Appeal. This could be a little dramatic in the pictures that I have here, but nobody likes to check out a book with a sticky cover. Recovering, really simple, easy way to refresh a book. Maybe you can save it from the weed pile by simply recovering that book. Hopefully your patrons' hands don't look like this after using your collection, and I hope your hands don't look like this after weeding or doing shelving. I worked in a library where we did have that. Literally, my hands looked like that. Why should we weed? It improves circulation. I like this quote, small but useful just makes good sense. Customers don't want to be overwhelmed with choices. That's one reason why they like the new book section. It's small enough so they can look over the whole collection. I think bookmobiles are popular partially because of this. Most users really like having a small selection to choose from. A quote from the crew manual again is, a good library is not necessarily a big library. So I want everybody to remember that. That idea of small but useful really comes into play when you're thinking about weeding. Having a lot of books that people don't want isn't the answer to the demand for more books. Something that drives me absolutely nuts is when a library director will ask me, how do I get people to check out more books? Then I find out that their entire collection is made up of donations that were given to them when citizens cleaned out their basements. Those things might have been popular 5 years ago, but anybody who wanted to read that book did so when it first came out. Public libraries need to be adding the titles their community wants to read, not just what somebody else is trying to get rid of. Accessibility. This kind of goes along with that one of those previous ones. When the books are all kind of jammed on the shelf, it really can make it hard to find stuff. I know, again, this picture seems like it might be overload. I hope none of your libraries look like that, but I have to admit, I actually did work in a library, and it wasn't quite this bad, but we did have stuff piled on the floor. Weeding was exactly what we needed to do to fix some of those problems. Here's another one for the idea of why we want to weed. Collection development, it really can help with that. When you weed, you notice the need that you might need more copies of things that are checked out a lot. So as you're going through pulling things off, you go, ooh, this one isn't on the shelf as I'm looking for that. Or, this one got checked out a whole bunch of times and it's hardly ever on the shelf. Maybe we need to get some more things. You'll also notice holes in your collection. One of the things we'll talk about in a second is stepping back and evaluating the collection as a whole and before you weed. And that, I think, helps identify those holes. As you're looking at those circulation patterns, hopefully also then you can make better choices when you purchase in the future. You kind of get that immediate feedback of what it is that people are looking for. Space. Why do we need to weed? We all know libraries have changed in the last few decades. We need space for other stuff besides books. We need space for things like computers, additional seating, room for programs, a library of things. And even though we want to be, we can't be all things for all people. Nobody, even the largest libraries in the room today, can provide everything our customers want. And then I always have a little tagline here. Wouldn't it be fun to live in that picture on the left? Cost. Patrons and staff can waste a lot of time if they have to plow through tons of junk material to find what they want. Some patrons want to get in, get their stuff, and get out. We need help with that by having a good weeded collection. Also, square footage is expensive. It's really interesting. You'll see this is the floor plan from Iowa City. When I put into Google floor plans of public libraries, this was one of the first ones that came up that was readable. So I was able to use the Iowa City floor plan in here, at least for their first floor. If you and that really goes to that thing, square footage is expensive. If you have too much junk, you may think you need more space than you actually do need. And I'm not saying that about Iowa City. That's not a commentary there. I just needed a picture of a map of a library. So last reason, why should we weed? The state says so. We have our public library standard. Standard 31 is a tier 3 standard, and it says every item in the library's collection is evaluated for retention, replacement, or withdrawal on a regular basis to determine its usefulness according to the library's collection development policy. On average, 3% or more of the collection is withdrawn each year. This is not just the state of Iowa recommendation. I mean, it is a standard that we have in there, but this is sort of accepted nationally. 3 to 5% is actually what you'll see across public libraries across the country. So this is one of my favorite things. And if you guys have seen this presentation before, you've maybe heard this, but I have some questions for you. If you've got milk in your refrigerator and it's curdled and it's outdated and it's lumpy, would you keep it? Because you don't know when you might get to the store. Would you give it to a neighbor to keep at her house? She's got space, right? Would you keep it because otherwise your refrigerator would be empty? Would you donate it to a food pantry for hungry children? All of these seem like good ideas, right? If you think about that with milk that's soured and outdated, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So if you have a book or some type of library material that is outdated with misinformation in it, why would you keep it? Because you don't know if you're going to ever be able to replace it or not. Why would you give it to another library just because they have more space? Why would you keep it? Because if you weeded everything that needs to be weeded, the shelves would be empty. I don't want to see a library like that. Why would you send your outdated resources to be used by children in another country? So this is one of my favorite things. I really love the analogy here. With the curdled milk. So to me, this sort of gets at that idea of why we need to continue keeping it. So what are we hoping to accomplish? What are the goals by doing this weeding on a regular basis? We want a better collection. So we're getting that better collection by getting rid of things that are dated or inaccurate. We're getting it by retaining some of the things that are useful to the public, or maybe relocating them to a place where they'll get used more. We are improving access to the collection. We're retaining items of historical significance, and it will also give you good data for future collection development. So where do I start? You know, frequently I'll have people say, yep, I knew all of that stuff. I know why I'm supposed to be weeding. I'm ready to do it, but what do I actually do to start? This is the state library, so of course our idea is you start with your policy. The piece in the middle here is a collection management tool that we talk about. When you purchase things, that's not the end of it. First we have to select, then we purchase, then we've got to process it, put it in the catalog. It gets used, Then we have to be thinking about maintenance and repair, and then we have to think about weeding or replacing, which means we go back into that cycle of selection. So weeding needs to be part of your collection development policy. So it starts with that policy, and then it kind of ends with the idea of disposal. One of the things I like about the idea of putting it in your policy is we frequently fall back on the policy when we've purchased something and somebody says, you shouldn't have that book in your collection. We can go back to our policy and say, here's why we have it. It fits within our policy guidelines here. You can use that same argument when you weed. If you've got a really strong weeding section in your policy, you can go back and point to that and say, here's what our board has decided is important in our collection. So ask yourself, does the collection meet your mission? Again, going back to what you and the board have decided is your mission. Does this collection meet your mission? If your mission is to provide current materials that patrons want to read, does your adult nonfiction collection do that? You maybe need to weed in order to accomplish that goal. So here's some of the criteria. I'm not going to read through all of these. I just want to highlight a couple of them. The first one we just talked a little bit about. I want you to think about your library's mission and what goals you have in your long-range plan or your strategic plan about that. Does this book, does this piece of your collection fit with that mission and the goals that you have? The second one, again, thinking about the needs and demands of your library's community. What is it that your community is looking for in your library? The other one that I really want to highlight is on the top right there, the degree to which the library serves as an archive or local history center. And this is a trap that a lot of, not necessarily librarians, but boards and city funders fall into. They still have this antiquated idea in their head that a library should be an archive. And there are libraries that need to serve as an archive. Most public libraries across the country do not need to be an archive. You may want to be a local history center, but again, think really strongly about that as well. Are there other places that are better suited to be a local history center? If so, then you might be thinking about that collection in a different way. Certainly think about the internet. One of the things that I found in some of my early notes was, we're always going to need almanacs in libraries. So, keep the newest one, but get rid of the rest of them. I'm not so sure. I haven't worked in a public library in a while now, but I'm not so sure we always need almanacs. That's the kind of stuff you're going to find online. If you've got some great places bookmarked, when somebody comes in and asks about the average rainfall in Brazil, you can go to the internet instead of looking at your reference collection. And then the last one I want to kind of highlight is the idea of interlibrary loan. And that sort of gets that idea of somebody might want it someday. All right, I threw it away 6 months ago. Somebody comes in and asks for it. The library down the street has it, or the bigger library in the next county over may have it. Don't forget to use interlibrary loan. And don't forget to think about that as you're doing your reading projects. So here's my just do it Nike swoosh. Weeding can be one of the most controversial aspects of collection development. So you want to have that carefully prepared, fully documented policy on weeding as part of your policy. Now, remember that a weeding policy can't replace individual judgment or common sense for that matter, but it can help make your actions more understandable to the public. So if you haven't already spent some time evaluating your collection and your community when you wrote your collection development policy, it's really a good idea to do that before you start a big weeding project. Knowing what's wanted and needed by your customers should make it easier to decide what should or shouldn't remain in your collection. I'm coming back to that old idea, something is not better than nothing. That outdated, wrong, or poorly presented information is not better than an empty space. Think about a travel book from 2005. Is there anything useful left in that? Attractions might have closed, restaurants or hotels might have changed, they might not even exist anymore or be in a different place. The reviews might be completely off. And then think about advances in medicine from 2005 to now. Are you doing anybody any good by having those things there? I would maintain that not only are you not doing anybody any good, but that's the kind of stuff you have to get off, even if it means an empty shelf, because we don't want to be doing harm as well. So down at the bottom here, another quote from the crew manual: libraries are not in the business of accumulating physical objects, but providing content and access to content. And there's lots of ways that we do that today in public libraries. So we know why we didn't weed. We know why we should weed. We know what we didn't weed. So what do we need? Not need. What do we weed? This is an easy first pass: poor appearance. Now, the interesting thing about this is pretty much anybody can do this. So if one of your ideas is I don't have time to weed, let somebody go through, a volunteer, a student assistant, have them go through and do a quick first pass of all that stuff that is got poor appearance. You get to decide, if it's got a crappy cover, or is it poorly bound, are there torn pages? Let somebody else do that, pull off all that stuff, stick it on a cart, and then you have time to sit down and evaluate that later. You have decisions to make at that point. Do we buy another copy? Do we buy a replacement title? All right, this one is kind of crummy looking, and maybe we can't get the exact same title, but maybe there's a better title out there. Or do I just toss this one and not worry about it? So let somebody take some of those easy tasks off your plate, and you get to be the decision maker at that point. What else do we weed? This is an obvious one: poor content, things that are outdated, obsolete, trivial, mediocre, self-published or small press materials that aren't circulating, biased, racist, sexist. We've talked about a lot of those. This one, I think, though, is a little bit trickier because you can't read everything. So how do you know it's poor content then? Do you have time to read reviews for all of these? Of course you don't. So flipping through and making some on-the-spot decisions is kind of the way you're going to have to do this one. Some of it's going to be really obvious. You can tell by the cover on some of those that this information is outdated. You can tell by a copyright date that it's outdated. But be careful of not falling into that trap of thinking you're going to pull everything that is inaccurate, because you're not going to be able to do that. Unused. This is quite a bit easier. Not being used in several years is a really good indicator that it's time to get rid of something. And then the idea of duplicates. You rarely need duplicates of things after a couple of years. And then again, that whole idea of, once it's sort of hit its peak, who really needs a book about Hannah Montana, which was a 2009 copyright anymore? One of the things I like to talk about here is getting rid of an entire collection, like a format that's not popular anymore, like videotapes. You only have to make the decision once, not item by item. So that's kind of a nice way to free up a lot of space. Another way is to get rid of an entire author or a series that just isn't popular anymore. I loved the Wagons West series by Dana Fuller Ross from the 70s and 80s. It was super popular at my library. I loved them. I read them all, but it took up a lot of space. I mean, shelves and shelves worth of space. When I finally made the decision to get rid of the whole thing, I got whole sets of empty shelves. I mean, I got rid of 3 shelves worth of Dana Fuller Ross. And again, one decision, 3 empty shelves with that one decision. So the crew manual, there's lots of really good stuff in here. This was written by some folks in Texas. They worked at the State Library of Texas. It was done, I want to say, in the 90s originally, and has been updated a few times. Problem is, the last time it was updated was 2012. So that title, A Weeding Manual for Modern Libraries, maybe not so much modern. But I do want to tell you this is available for free online. I've got the website there where you can go and actually download it, or if you just Google Crew and Texas State Library, you'll be able to find it. If you are new to weeding, I highly recommend actually reading this entire publication start to finish. Besides the articles about weeding in general, lots of this class material was pulled from the Crew manual, as you can tell. I've referenced it several times now. But it also has a really great section on weeding nonfiction, where it gives you 3 criteria to consider for each book that you look at. It's based on Dewey numbers, and it's broken down by pretty specific numbers. We're really going to delve into how to use this in that next class that I'm doing at the end of the month, or middle of the month, whenever that one is coming up. using data-driven decisions, I think is the name of that one. So here's just an example to just kind of set this off for you so that you understand why this is such a great resource for public libraries. Like I said, it's got all kinds of good articles in it, but here's to me the meat of this. It breaks it down by Dewey number. So it says in the 370s, which is education, it uses this formula called 10-3 MUSTY. In the 520s, which is space and astronomy, it's 5-3 and MUSTY. In the 636 pets, it's 5-2 and MUSTY. So here's what those numbers mean. The first figure is the number of years since the book's latest copyright date. So you pull that book off the shelf or you run your report and you take a look at it and you find everything that's been over 10 years old. What's that latest copyright date? The second figure then refers to the maximum permissible time without usage. So they recommend in education materials, if it's not been used in 3 years, you can yank that, especially if it's 10 years old. And then the third is they've got this acronym MUSTY, and we're going to look at that in a little bit here. I think the next slide is where that comes. Obviously, with that middle one, you need to make sure that you've actually owned the books for 3 years. So if it hasn't gone out in 3 years, but you just bought it, that obviously is going to make you look at it a little bit differently here. Another thing that we talk a lot about is these are guidelines. They are not intended to act as a substitute for your professional judgment calls and, again, common sense. So, this is not the be all and the end all. It's just some guidelines for you to use that kind of helps you think about your weeding project. So here's MUSTY. The M stands for misleading. That's a pretty obvious one, something that's factually inaccurate. The books that, say the earth is flat. U is ugly. It's worn out. It's ripped pages. It's no covers. S, when you buy that new travel guide to Hawaii, toss the old one. It has now been superseded. T, I always kind of chuckle about this idea of things being trivial in public libraries. We like ephemeral stuff in public libraries. It's what keeps people coming back to the public library. But again, once its time is over, it's time to get rid of it. So let's see, I've got a couple of examples of that a little bit later on. Irrelevant. If you live in Des Moines, you're probably not going to need books because you're probably not going to be reading about how to buy a yacht. That might not be one of the things you're really concerned with in a landlocked community. E, again, this is kind of a weird one, the way they put this, but basically the idea that it's available elsewhere. This is the beauty of interlibrary loan or reciprocal borrowing if you're part of a consortium, or perhaps if it's available in electronic format. So that's their criteria in here. When you look at a book, you pull an education book off the shelf, one of the three things, and you can make your own decision on this. Does it have to have all three things before you toss it? Does it have to have one out of the three? Does it have to have two out of the three? But take a look at those. Is it more than 10 years old? Has it not been used in 3 years? Does it meet any of the MUSTY criteria? That's all reasons to take a look at pulling that book off the shelf. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this one, but as part of the crew manual, she talks about how to do a quick and dirty weeding thing. You just got a whole new collection in and you need to weed the S through Z's in your adult fiction collection because you want to add your manga on the end of those shelves there. So here's some quick and dirty ways to do it. And again, don't forget to use those volunteers or student assistants. Print out those reports and have somebody go through and make that first pass on those. Those are just some suggestions there. So again, the crew manual says, here's the 10 steps that you need. You can kind of take a look at these. There's probably more than that, or you could get rid of some of them. But I want to just talk about each of these kind of in turn really quickly here. Make weeding a part of your policy. We've kind of already talked about that. Get your circulation statistics report. Like I said, we're going to talk a lot more about how to use those reports in that doing data-driven collection development decisions. So there's going to be a lot more about using those reports, but that's a really great place to start. So be thinking about that prior to starting your weeding project. You want to be figuring out which of those reports you want to have. Build weeding into the year's work calendar. I've got a slide coming up a little bit later where we'll talk about how to put together a sample calendar. Gather all of your stuff. Get those circ stats. Get the sticky notes, your pens, your crew manual, your book cart, your disposal slips. We'll talk about those in, actually that comes up now. So what the crew manual talks about, these disposal slips, it's actually an appendix at the end where it's literally a piece of paper that you can print out that's got 6 or 8 of these things on. But it suggests using one of these slips, print it out, cut them apart, put it on a sticky note, whatever, and shove it in the book. There are going to be things in there like, does this book need to be rebound? Does it need to be mended? Do we need to preserve this somehow? Should we just promote this book? Would promoting actually make it go out more often here? Do we just need to donate the book to somebody? Should we check for other locations? If other people in our county have it, maybe we don't need it anymore. Maybe it's just time to get rid of it altogether. Maybe it should go to the book sale. Maybe it should be replaced. All of those are little check marks on that disposal slip. So you make the decision while you've got that book in your hand, you make the little check mark and you shove it in there. That seems a little overboard to me. I don't need to put a thing in that says dispose of this because that's 90% of what I want. It's either going to the book sale or into the trash. So maybe you do have little colored slips that you can stick in. Everything that's got a yellow slip in it means it's going to the book sale. Everything that's got a blue slip in it means that it's going into the trash after it's been withdrawn, obviously. So make those decisions sort of on the fly as you're doing it. Disposal slips might be the way to go. Sticky notes might be it. Like I said, colored pieces of paper might be another way to do it. One of the things when I talk about donating, one of the stories that I tell, library that I worked at had like 40 books on the planet. So that's fairly small rural public library. And they had like 40 books on the planets. And I kept thinking, why on earth do we have all of those sitting on our shelves? And then every March, the grade school teacher would assign all of the kids in her class to come into the library, check out a book about the planets, and write a report. It was taking up a lot of space on my shelves. That's more than a shelf's worth of books. Did I need that the whole rest of the year? Nope. Did I need it for the general public? Nope. I needed a few books on planets, but I didn't need all of them. So we made the decision to weed those books and donate them to the public school teacher. We'll talk a little bit more about what's legal to donate and what isn't, but that made a whole lot of sense for me because now I got space on my shelf, and it made a whole lot of sense for her. The one thing that we talked a lot about when I talked to that teacher was the whole idea we still want the kids to come into the library, and so we worked out a time when they could come in and do other things. Excuse me just a second here. I got to figure out how to mute. All right, you guys, sorry about that. And now don't look at my shirt because I think I just dripped water down the front of my shirt here. So another thing I want you to think about before you start actually doing this big weeding project is, do you want to do an inventory at the same time? There are pros and cons. Sometimes it makes sense, sometimes it doesn't. But at least think about that as you're kind of going through your decision to do that. Do you have time to do an inventory now? After you have pulled all of those books, take a look, and if you've got slips in them, where do they go? Excuse me. So treat them according to the slips. If it says, this is ready to go into the dumpster, withdraw it, throw it in the dumpster. Checking pulled books against the list. Sorry, I missed that one. Coughing fit sort of got to me here. So check those pulled books against the list. I know as a new librarian, I was really concerned, especially in adult fiction, that I was going to be pulling something that was really important, something that a public library needed to have that because I was inexperienced, I maybe didn't know. So I found lists that were out there, the best of, or the public library collection volumes by Wilson. I don't know who's publishing them anymore. It used to be published by Wilson. We'll talk about some of those lists again as we look at the data-driven, but there are places out there that if you're worried about making that kind of mistake that you can check against. And then replacement checking and ordering. So if you've got a note on this one that says, we don't have anything on headaches anymore. All the stuff we had was, 40 years old. And we know that there's been a lot of movement in terms of how do you deal with the migraine. So we throw away all of our headache books, but we need to order some more. So make sure that you've got time built into your schedule to be able to get those things ordered and get replacements for things that you just had to throw away. And then the last one, I think this is kind of an interesting last step, set up displays. Sometimes you think, oh, I just know this book would go out if people knew we had it. So put together a display. It could be a last chance display, or it could be a display about the collection. You know, here's romance titles. And so you throw on some of those. And then again, if you've given it that last chance and it's been on display and it still doesn't go out, it's time to get rid of that one. Non-print is really tricky, and we're going to include ebooks on the next slide with that. But when I think about non-print for this slide, I think about things like software. I don't know if libraries are still loaning out software or not, but I know that was something we did for a long time. Libraries loaned out art prints. I don't know how many in Iowa are. Carrie Ann, I saw that you're in here. I know that you guys had a bunch of art prints that are now up for auction. So I'm assuming that means the library is sort of getting rid of that collection. Computer games, libraries, I think, still circulate those. We still have CDs occasionally, and a lot of libraries still have DVDs. So how do you get rid of those? Does that same criteria apply when you're doing it? I really liked this one. It's very similar to MUSTY, but they use the acronym WORST. A DVD that's worn out, something that's out of date, something that's rarely used, something that is supplied elsewhere, or trivial or faddish. When I looked at that one, the thing that came to my mind was the whole idea during pandemic. How many of you remember Squid Games? I don't know if that ever came out on DVD, but those are the kinds of things that were a fad for a while, and now they've sort of hit their mark, and it's time to get rid of that stuff. So be thinking about that trivial or faddish one. Another couple of reasons that it's harder to get rid of the non-print things are, first off, there's very few reviews of non-print stuff out there. So with a book, if I'm worried that it's something that we should keep, or I think it's probably a crappy book, and so I can look it up on a list or a review source, and it says, yep, this was not a very good book, so people have read it, it's over, we can get rid of that one. You don't find that very often on DVDs or music CDs, if anybody's still got those. So it's a little bit harder to make some of those decisions. Another idea is the fact that there are very few best lists. Again, we can go back for books and we can find out what were the best books of this decade or whatever, or these are books that are really important to the literary canon or whatever it is. Again, a little bit harder to find for software or, well, art prints for sure. We're not going to find that. So there aren't very many of those, and the ones that are quickly become obsolete that are out there. The last thing I think about, I found this in something that I was reading for this as I prepped for it. If your materials were selected primarily for entertainment value, so think, the bulk of your DVD collection, we purchase that for the entertainment value, then your weighting decisions are going to be based primarily on use, popularity, and wear. Those are going to be sort of the three big ideas when you're weighting those. But if you've got another part of your DVD collection, maybe you have a series of documentaries. If it's going to be based on that content or subject coverage, then you can go back and use some of those other ideas. Think about the specific goal of that collection. Why are people using it? Is this for information? Then yeah, we need to get rid of it if it's outdated or bad information in there. If it's for entertainment, you can leave that at that point. So now I want to lead into, again, kind of a sort of non-print kind of idea. What about ebooks? You can't ever run out of space for ebooks. So what's the point of weeding those? Some of you who are part of Bridges, especially if you've got Advantage collections, that downloadable consortium that we have, if you have an Advantage collection, that means you get to buy things that are only for your patrons, but then you can share them back with the Bridges collection. So we just sent out a newsletter to the Bridges Advantage libraries, talking to them about weeding. One of the things, let's see, I've got to see if I can find that. So we asked people to take a look at the items in their Advantage collections that have expired. Some of you may realize that when we buy a lot of ebooks, and now even audiobooks are coming under this, they're limited and they expire. Some expire after a year or 2 years or after 24 circulations, but we buy it, it gets checked out, and then at some point it just disappears from our collection. Well, the unfortunate thing is it doesn't actually disappear. It stays in your collection. So if somebody sees that in your collection and they put a hold on it and there's no circulations left, you technically don't own it anymore, they can't check it out. And so they get this message that says unknown wait time. So they are sitting with this hold on a book that you really don't own anymore. You don't have a copy to give them, essentially. Which makes it frustrating for everybody. It's frustrating for the patron, it's frustrating for you, it's frustrating for all of us who are looking at that collection. So that's a really good example of something you want to weed. If you don't have any intention of repurchasing that book after it's expired, then go ahead and weed it from your collection so you don't frustrate those patrons by having them put wait times on it. Again, the other things, for especially for some of your nonfiction things, take a look at the copyright date. Older material that's no longer useful, you want to get rid of that. Again, same as print books. Outdated material in ebook format is just as detrimental to the collection as our physical books that have incorrect information or information that's no longer accurate. Multiple copies. Maybe in your Advantage copies or other things that you purchase, you don't buy a whole lot of multiple copies of audio, but I'm here to tell you for Bridges, we absolutely buy multiple copies. We have 60 copies of titles that people have asked for over and over. So as they expire, we just let them expire and don't purchase new copies. So we do some weeding as we're weeding our Bridges consortium. And again, the same holds true for you if you're working on those. So if you don't need those multiple copies of downloadables, get rid of them. Then be thinking about format. Are people in your community doing more streaming? So maybe you don't need to buy the audiobooks. Maybe you don't need to have some of the downloadable ebooks. Are they purchasing things themselves? So again, be thinking about those. Sometimes they're only available in formats and they're not being used by your community. So we can think about the fact that those formats are going to be changing over time, and that can help give us clues on what we need to weed. And again, think about those MUSTY ideas. Oops, sorry about that. Misleading, again, factually inaccurate. If it's nonfiction, yeah, you probably want to get rid of that. Ugly, probably not relevant to ebooks. Superseded, absolutely. If you've got a travel book on Hawaii that's from 2012, it's time to get rid of that one. You can weed that ebook. Again, it's not taking up shelf space, but there's no point in having it in your collection. Trivial, again, things that were of fleeting interest. Again, thinking about Squid Games on that one, or irrelevant to your community and things that you can find elsewhere. This one was really interesting. When I talked to Sam about this, I said, I've been doing this presentation for a number of years. Holy cassimoly, I'm running behind here. I've been doing this presentation for a number of years, and it's in the endorsement catalog. What do I need to do to sort of spice this up? And she said, think about, sort of added value. What are things that we can add to this? And she suggested, how do you weed a library of things? I don't have any really good answers for you on this one, but I'd like to suggest take a look at your collection development policy and your weeding policy. Do you have anything in there? What happens when the crock pot cord gets burned at somebody's house? Do you replace the crock pot? Do you replace the cord? Do you just throw it away and not have it back again? Be thinking about what makes sense in terms of, is this item usable? Maybe we've got a game and you lost one card. Can you still use it without that card? Probably. If you lose the game board, you probably can't anymore. Now you got to be thinking about weeding that. A drill set that you've got. If you lose one bit, do you need to weed the whole thing? Probably not. As long as you still got the drill, you can do that. So think about replacing those parts, repairing some of those items, or weeding altogether when you're thinking about that. Let's see. This is just a sample. I'm not going to talk necessarily about this, but as you're thinking about weeding throughout the year, I like the idea of it's not a one-time thing. I don't weed everything in 2 months and then I don't have to do it again for 3 years. Think about building it into your schedule. Maybe it's every week, maybe it's every month. You know, take a section of your collection and just sort of walk through it. If you can make it formalized like this, in this month, we're going to do our adult nonfiction, 0s, 1s, and 2s. That's a great way to divide it up. But take a look at your collection and make it work for you. Don't forget to remove this stuff from your catalog. That is totally left out of the crew manual. And that is the whole, this can take up a whole lot of time. Okay, great, I've pulled it off, I've made the decision, it's time to weed it. Now somebody has to go through and figure out how do we remove it from the catalog. In Iowa, there are huge numbers of automation systems. These are just a few of the ones that we know about. And down in the left-hand corner, we still got cards. It doesn't take as long anymore to pull things from these automated systems as it used to when we had to pull the main entry card, and then we had to pull the title card, and then we had to pull the author card, and all of the subject cards, and all of the series cards. That took a long time. It's faster, but you still have to do it. That is a piece of the weeding project as you're thinking about how long this is going to take. And then this is sort of a silly thing, but don't forget to stamp them withdrawn. How many of you have had people bring stuff back to the library and say, oh, you know, I bought this at the book sale and I'm going to redonate it to you. Make sure that they understand you have already made a decision on this book. I don't need this in my collection anymore. So make sure those things are stamped withdrawn as you're getting rid of those. I'm running short of time. Sam, I said this was only going to take 45 minutes and I'm already at 55. Getting rid of your materials. You can donate, you can sell, you can recycle, and you can destroy. Donate. I do want to talk to you about this one. Because of Iowa law, you cannot donate items to Goodwill or the Boy Scouts or even a daycare. You cannot donate to any private entity. You may, however, under the law, donate items to another government agency, so a public school or a jail or a Head Start because they're government funded. The law is a little bit murkier when it comes to donating to the Friends of the Library. It's best to sell them to the Friends, even if it's only for a tiny amount. Then the Friends can sell them and they can use that money to support the library. Let's see, what else? We're going back again to that whole idea, don't donate them to another library because you know they don't have anything. If it's a multiple copy of a brand new bestseller, you know, maybe that works. But just because they don't have a lot on their shelves doesn't mean they want your old junk. Again, selling them, you can actually sell them out of your building, out of your library building and put the money back into the budget. It takes a lot of time, so be thinking about the amount of time your staff is taking to get them ready and, you know, sell them and do it that way. But that is legal. You just put the money back into your budget with a budget amendment. Using consignment companies can also be a way of doing this. Oops, I'm not quite there yet. Sorry. I used to have a whole slide on a whole bunch of places where you could sell or donate your used books online. There's only 2 consignment companies that are left that I know about now. One is Baker & Taylor Sustainable Shelves, and the second one is Better World Books. Those are the only 2 that I have found that libraries are using at this point. So if you know of other ones, throw them in the chat and I will make sure to add that later. So recycle is another way that we can do it. Use them for altered books. These are just some really cool ideas of altered books that I found. And then the last one is destroy. This might be your last resort, but it's okay. Really, it is. I know that it's hard, but there's usually a reason that a book hasn't circulated in 5 or 10 years, and you can safely throw it away. Double check your city ordinances, though, or county ordinances on what you can do with city property and make sure that you're following that. So again, do sit down with your staff and trustees and explain this process. I really like this second one. Save examples of the most blatant examples. So when a citizen comes and complains, why are you throwing away books? You can say to them, you know, this book was sexist, or this book that I pulled from the library had someday man might go to the moon on this. So save some of those examples of really good reasons why you weeded that title so that you have those. Make weeding an ongoing process. And again, check for your city and county policies for items that were paid for with tax dollars. Don't make your weeded books a problem for somebody else. Don't take hundreds of them to the landfill. Don't keep them just in case somebody objects to it. There are ways that you can get rid of these. So what is stopping you now? This picture is a lovely weeded garden, just like your collection ought to be. Next up, we're finished weeding basics. We've got data-driven weeding coming up at the end of the month. We've got weeding the youth collection with Janae coming up in a couple of weeks, or maybe it's next week. I don't know, I got my dates all mixed up. And then we have the panel that Sam talked about called Wedded to Weeding. And yay, Sam, I made it, but we only got 2 minutes.
You did make it, barely. I knew that when we were talking about this, I was a little surprised when I saw your recording. It was 45 minutes. I thought,
I was too.
This is going to not go so fast when Becky is there and hearing the chat and having so much fun with all of our attendees today. So there is a good question that came through here right at the end, which is, can we put weeded books out on a free table?
Okay, let me think about that one for a sec. I think the answer is no. That might be a Mandy question for sure.
Okay.
Because it was paid for with tax dollars. And there is a law, an Iowa law on the books that says you may not give away things that were paid for with tax dollars. So I'm thinking the answer to that is no.
Okay. Check the library law FAQs and then when in doubt, contact Mandy.
Yes.
Another question that came through kind of close to the beginning was memorial books. And this one, people did kind of chat about it a little bit, but are memorial books a special circumstance? Do families have a chance to have those books?
This is my opinion, and actually I've got this in the learning objectives for the next session, but there's this whole idea that some books are sacred and some of those are memorial books. In my mind, in my opinion, they're only different in your mind. They can be weighted. Anything that you accept as a gift should fit in your collection development policy. Don't accept the gift if it's not something that fits with your collection. And then when it's time to weed, I have heard this, number one, when you're ready to get rid of book sale, if you're going to do that, I thought that was a brilliant piece of advice. But also, if it's an easy one, it's Mrs. So-and-so down the street that did it, offer it back to her when it's time to weed that book. Ask if they want it. Ask the family if they want it. If they don't, rip out that book plate and get rid of it.
Yeah, so we're at the bottom of our hour here. I do want to mention.
Sorry, guys.
No, it's all good. We did have a pretty active chat, so you can scroll back through that at some point, including a couple of additional ideas for book consignment. Discover Books was mentioned a couple times, and thrift books. Good. So folks may want to take a look at that. And I will just say them out loud for the posterity of the recording as well. But we do, as Becky mentioned, have 3 additional pieces of our series coming up here on the 15th will be our next installment. So you have between now and the 15th to maybe start looking at that crew manual, some of the other resources Becky mentioned. And I put the link to that in the chat. The week after the 15th, I suppose that's the 22nd, is weeding the youth collection, and Janae Jackson-Dorian, State Library Consultant, will be doing that with us. And then at the end of the month is our panel, Wedded to Weeding, where we'll get to hear from some practitioners about weeding projects that they've undertaken. So my thanks to Becky for being here, and to all of you for joining us today as well. And we'll hang out if there's any more questions in the chat, but otherwise, thanks everyone very much.